Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us, or good morning, or good evening, wherever you may be. This is Lori Stevens speaking to you this afternoon. I'm in my office in Massachusetts, just north of Boston, and also with me we have Al Megger, who is a deep web investigator with Bright Planet. And Al and I will be your presenters today, welcoming people from mostly the United States. We had several from Canada as well, and then a few just outside of North America, from Europe, and might have seen somebody from South Africa in there. I don't really recall for sure. So we're going to get started, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to do a real high-level overview of social media and sort of how to implement it with some strategy, and just mainly just trying to make the point that you should be implementing it with some strategy. And then of course we're going to turn things over to Al, who is going to be talking to you about Bright Planet and a couple of the solutions that Bright Planet has to offer, which are just the creme de la creme. So you definitely want to know about Bright Planet and things that are available from them. So getting started, I think most of you know, if you know who I am, I live and breathe social media use with law enforcement, and it's all I do, it's all I think about. I don't work with anybody outside of law enforcement, not that I wouldn't help an occasional firefighter, but I pretty much like to stick with police officers. And so I thought we'd start with just a little bit of kind of historical perspective on how did we get where we are today. It goes back a long time. To be surprised perhaps that it wasn't just something that sprung upon the scene as it sort of feels like with regard to social media. This guy here that you're seeing is Marshall McLuhan, and for somebody like me who studied communications for a lot of years, Marshall McLuhan is almost godlike. He's a philosopher and a really smart man, and he wrote a lot about what we're experiencing today, and he wrote about it back in the 60s. Okay, he wrote what you're seeing on your screen right now, that that we would be experiencing one big gossip column powered by an electronically computerized dossier bank that would keep an unerasable record of our tiniest actions. And isn't that exactly what we're experiencing? Marshall McLuhan wrote these words in the 60s. He looked at this. He could see what technology was doing to our lives, and he told us this was going to happen. He wrote about the global village. Some of you may have heard about the global village, and the medium is the message, and meaning that not that content wasn't important, but the medium or the way we are going to communicate was really going to affect how we communicate and affect the content. And certainly that's what we're seeing happen. And then also, it was in the 1970s, there was this book that written by a guy named Ted Nelson. I believe it was in 1970, and it was reprinted in 1987. You can get your hands on a copy. Let me know. I want it because that's really hard to find. And Ted Nelson wrote that in order to understand the future of democracy, you can and must understand computers now. And he also told us, look, with going from mainframe computers to personal computers, and continuing to make them smaller and smaller and more powerful all the time, we were going to be putting power into the hands of the people. And that is what he meant by, if you want to understand democracy, you have to understand computers. And so it really is, you know, something that's been happening for a long time, for many decades. And everybody's struggling with this stuff. You guys are struggling. Every industry in the world right now is struggling with how to get their head around this stuff. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to speak at the Massachusetts Association of Crime Analysts annual meeting in beautiful Hyannisport in Massachusetts in Cape Cod. And the keynote there was Dr. George Kelling. Some of you who are in policing would recognize that name as the one of the gentlemen behind the broken windows theory of policing that folks like Bill Bratton have made very well known in his work. And Dr. Kelling gave a very compelling speech that day, and one of the things that he said was we shouldn't do for people what they can do for themselves, and pretty much capturing, you know, the philosophies behind community policing and the Peelian principles. And I thought, you know, he's absolutely right. And everything he was saying really was backed up by what we're experiencing with social media, even though he wasn't talking about social media. It wasn't a social media conference, but there I'm sitting there going, yeah, of course, this makes so much sense. And more today than ever, you know, can we achieve what he's saying about not doing for people what they can do for themselves. And then he also said, you know, if we shut down 911 for one day every week, because we just told people needed maintenance. You know, every Saturday we said we need to, you know, fix it. It needs maintenance, and we shut it down. He said crime would go down because people would mobilize. And there again, I'm sitting there, the social media in me going, yeah, you know what? I think he's absolutely right. And not only that, but I think it is. If you take a look at right now, if there's you know, an unsolved murder and the police aren't really doing things as fast as maybe the victim's family thinks they should, they're on social media and they are putting up a Facebook page and they're doing whatever they can to get the word out themselves to try to find their loved one's killer, if there's a missing person, so forth and so on. In every way that you can think of, if it's possible, they're using social media themselves to mobilize. It isn't about shutting down 911 so much as giving them this extra power that we're doing, that Ted Nelson and Marshall McLuhan, you know, told us was going to happen so many decades ago. There's also a study I like to refer to that was done by a company called Accenture. And Accenture did a study of, I don't know, people in 5 or 6 countries. And one of the main findings was that 88% of the people they surveyed said that they want to help their police prevent and solve crime. Okay, they want to help you. Now, how many of you on this call would say that you have 88% of the people you serve? Are you engaging them? Are you using them to help you prevent and solve crime? You probably have the, you know, the 5 or 10% that are on your doorstep every day and listen to police scanners and they're really into it. And maybe the next 20 to 25% are engaged with National Night Out and things like that. But how do you get to that 88%? Okay, the 12% that aren't engaged, probably 5 to 10 of the, you know, 5 to 10% are the ones who you're spending all your time with because they're committing the crime, right? But 88% law-abiding citizens, they want to help you. And so now you have this opportunity with open source technologies to engage them. And so my question is, are you getting 88%? And it doesn't matter if you have a population of 100 people or 100,000 people or 1 million people. Are you getting 88% of them to help you? They want to, okay? Some of them want you to make it really easy for them. Many of them in this survey said they wanted it to be anonymous. Many of them said they like to do it with mobile technologies. But the question is, are you taking advantage of that, and are you approaching your communication strategy strategically? And the reason then that that you should be doing this, if you're hearing what I'm saying here is, we're talking about the front-facing community engagement, PR side of the house, affecting now getting 88% of your people help you to prevent and solve crime. So I like to tell my clients, look, that separation between the front of the house and the back of the house, the PR side, and the, you know, the let's solve crime side of the house used to be a lot more separate than it is today. Today, it's much more, there's a gray line there. It's really not so separated, okay? And so if we can engage 88% of your people, we can crowdsource those people, you're going to find that you're going to become much more efficient, and you're going to have those people helping you. And so how do you do that? And it isn't just, you know, if you build it, they will come. It isn't just about, let's put up a Facebook page and they're going to be there. They're going to show up and they're going to start engaging. No, they're not, okay? It's up to you to build those relationships. It's a process, okay? You have to begin to engage them yourselves. They then see that you're doing this, that you're not just those stereotypical police officers who put out information and maybe listen to you, but you don't really share, you don't engage, you don't really have anything to do in terms of interactively with the people you serve, right? That's how you build confidence. You get out there and you do that. Then you earn their trust, and then you've got that relationship built, okay? It isn't something that you can do when there's a crisis and then start. And it isn't something that, even if you start before the crisis, that you can do without a plan. If you really want to get 88% or, you know, whatever that majority, that big number is for your city exactly, you're not going to get them without some effort and without some strategy to it. Okay, and then also what happens is when you have a situation where you know you need the public's help, you're going to get it. In this case, some people think this is a little excessive here, but I like this photo because, and I really overuse it, but I use it in just about every presentation I make because I think it really makes a point. When you have a situation in real life, you take control of that scene. You put up this magical yellow tape and you own that scene. With social media, what we're trying to get you folks to also realize, and many of you do, but also that there's a scene virtually. There's a virtual scene. And by really approaching these things strategically and having a plan and realizing that there's something going on virtually as well, then you begin to get into that conversation and not control it so much as influence it and potentially, um, you know, keep your frontline guys and girls safer because something's going on that could be affecting them. But mostly you're going to be able to get your messages of public safety into the conversation that's going on virtually. You know, if you know that A, that it's going on, and B, you know how to get in there and you have a plan for when it happens. Okay, so let's just take a look at a couple of examples of police departments around the world, just a few, who are doing a pretty good job. Now, the Boston police, they get to, for good reason, they get a lot of credit for doing a good job with social media during the Boston bombings. They didn't really have a plan. I don't know if they do today, but they sure got on it during the bombings, and we all know what happened there. Part of the reason, a big part of the reason why they were so successful is it was such a huge event. The world was watching that even if they hadn't really built those relationships ahead of time, they had the attention of everybody. They built their following on Twitter from, I don't know, 16, 20, 30, 40,000, somewhere in there to well over 300,000, okay? Just like that, seemingly overnight, actually took about a week, but they really had everybody's attention. And even without, you know, really sophisticated use of hashtags and things like that, they got their messages listened to just because it was such a huge event. So they did a pretty good job. In New South Wales in Australia, this is going back 2 years, and I'm still using them because they won the award, my Connected Cops Award, for large agency use of social media because they designed this thing called Project iWatch. And what iWatch is basically taking their neighborhood watch program and replicating it on Facebook. It began in August of 2011, and they now have over 100 of their local area commands and 170 closed groups within Neighborhood Watch. Now, this is a geographic area twice the size of Texas. They can't be everywhere, right? This is a perfect example of really strategically going about exchanging information with their citizens. And one of their commanding officers described it as this is their eyes and ears. They are really engaging the community. They are really putting the power in the hands of their people in being their watchdog, if they will, and helping them help their citizens. So it's a really great example of a partnership there. Also in Australia, over in Queensland, it was, I want to say Christmas Eve of 2010, as I recall, when this cyclone Tasha hit. Again, this is also about twice the size of Texas. 90% of the area was declared disaster area. 5 million people were affected here, okay? So all of the other government agencies completely shut down under the weight of all of the communication requests that were coming in. They could not handle it because they were not ready, but the Queensland police were. The Queensland police already had a strategy. Okay, they had a very well thought out plan for how they would communicate with their citizens in the event of any kind of crises or situation, and then they were really tested when this cyclone hit. To the point of 39 million story views, 24 hours, 450 hits per second on their Facebook page. When you think about it, that was 2.5 years ago, almost 3 years ago, when this happened. So many more people are on social media today. It would be all the more reason that you need to be ready. You know, they say build your ark before it rains, and this is a really, really great example. And it's all about building those relationships, getting out there, getting your social media strategy together, when you don't need it, and because eventually you're going to need it. You know, how would you like to be the police in Toronto and have to deal with the Rob Ford disaster? Well, they really got hit hard up there when that first came out, and they took. I know my friend Scott Mills, who runs the social media up there, said he took home over 700 mentions on Twitter that he needed to reply to, and it took him about 24 hours to get his act together to do it, but he did it, and now realizes how important it is to be ready for that ahead of time. So you know it's going to happen, right? Speaking of Toronto, it's one of the strategies I have developed in the past. This is going back close to 3 years now, and all these little boxes you see on the screen are their divisions. Okay, there's 17 divisions in Toronto. You can imagine it's not really possible, not at least effectively, for the people in the corporate communications office. That's what they call their media, their communications office at headquarters. It's not really effective for them, for those 5 to 10 people, to handle the communications and be knowledgeable about everything that's going on in Toronto to the degree they would need to in order to build those relationships like we're discussing today. And so what we did in Toronto was really decentralize those communications, put a lot of power into each of the divisions, and also into each of 9 community consultative groups that exist in the Toronto Police Department. And now, it's not to say we just said, here you go for it. Here's a smartphone, do your thing. In fact, they didn't give them smartphones. They don't have the resources to do that. But what they did give them was some really good training, explain to them the strategy, train them on the policy, what's acceptable, what's not, and set up some guidelines, and they've had very few issues, and they've really done a great job towards building relationships. Now they've got more work to do. They're kind of going to Plan B now, and restructuring, taking another look at it. But they are widely recognized as the world leaders, and for good reason. I'm currently working with Dallas, and so I put them up here. It's a very similar situation, but not exactly the same. There's no cookie cutter approach to this, but in Dallas there are 7 divisions, and we're going to be doing something very similar. And again, on a very laid out, well orchestrated plan to have 3 phases, somebody in each of the 7 divisions, very small, just a few to start, but they're going to go through training for like 3 days before they're allowed to go out and start representing the department officially in social media. And I would say keep a good look on Dallas. Maybe February, March of next year, you're going to see a lot of good stuff going on. So changing gears just a little bit here before I turn it over to Al, and this is just to make my point that social media is not a checkbox, okay? Too many agencies have approached it that way. I think in the United States especially, even most of the large agencies, they put up a Facebook page, they start a couple of Twitter accounts, and they say, we're good now, we check that box, we're doing social media. It really is more about strategy. And I kind of beat that horse a lot. And I think we're starting to see some agencies realize that, but it's a little slow in coming. As leaders in this area, I tell folks they need to be kind of on top of these few things here, these several things I should say. These are not necessarily people who are doing the social media, but as anybody who is responsible for implementing open source technology, a communication strategy in their organizations. These are the things they need to be on top of. Having a strategy, having policies, the policies being a communications policy, what you expect of your employees on duty, what you allow them off duty, and those sorts of things. Investigations policy would be covering things like who authorizes an investigation. When you go undercover, do you need permission to go undercover? You should have permission to go undercover, but one very large agency in this country, very large, think very large East Coast agency in this country, has a policy out there that steps you through what kinds of permissions you need if you're going to go UC. But if you're not going to go UC, it's like fair game. Go do your thing. Well, that's wrong, wrong, wrong. You really need to have some good procedures in place for managing any kind of investigation in social media, because who wants to lose your case, right? And who wants to be careless enough that when you get in front of a judge that something's going to be thrown out and you can't use it? And we don't have a lot of precedents in this area, and most very smart officers that I know who are thinking about this stuff are applying your real world guidelines into what you're doing online, but there's way too much wild, wild west going on still today. So you need a good, strong investigations policy. A cyber vetting policy applies to how are you investigating the backgrounds of people you might hire, whether they be sworn or civilian, and what kinds of consistent measures do you have there? Do you have a wall-off procedure for if you, during your investigation, find that somebody's in a protected class? Do you wall that information off from the person who's going to be doing the hiring? And if you do you have a policy that says so? Because if you have a policy and you get sued, you're going to be in a lot stronger position to say, this is what we live and breathe, this is our policy. You must have a policy in this area. I should add to this list a BYOD policy, BYOD being bring your own device. Unfortunately, nobody's really figured it out yet, but there's a few organizations that are getting there, and that's definitely something you need to be thinking about, because very few agencies can afford to give your employees smartphones and so forth, and kind of relying on them bringing their own. Well, what's your policy surrounding so many issues there? And the legal challenges, you got to be providing training. What are you doing with social media monitoring? We're going to talk about that in greater depth today with Al. And then officer safety is huge, huge, huge in these areas. And then just change management. You know, this stuff is changing so fast, and we all know that police officers don't like to change. But you're going to change. You have to change if you're going to be living and breathing in the modern world today. But if you're the leader of this, you really want to also think about how do you help your people accept all these changes that are coming down the pipe. The method that I use when I work with people, and what I also just put out there just to help you folks get your heads around it and give you sort of a framework for thinking about it, is this kind of framework that I developed called the COPS social media method. When I say that I developed it, I'm not saying that I invented anything other than the acronym. It really is a process that's been tried and true in PR for decades, and it's really all about promoting the understanding of your audience and the goals that you have with your audience before you really think about, are you going to tweet, or are you going to do Facebook, or are you going to be on Pinterest, okay? And so again, what I see a lot of are agencies coming in at this level, and they're saying, okay, you know, the chief went to a conference, and he or she comes back and says, gosh, the social media thing's getting to be a big thing. We better have a Facebook page. And, you know, the chief next door has a Facebook page, and we can't be outdone, so Sergeant, go make us a Facebook page. And so that's what the dutiful sergeant does. And then everybody looks around and says, well, what do we do with this Facebook page now that we have it? Okay. Twitter, yep, got that. Now what? What do we tweet? What do we tweet about? Oh, I know. Let's tweet. Let's send everything we tweet to Facebook, and let's to Twitter. There, that makes it easy. Wrong. Okay, that's not the way to go about it. What you want to do is really spend about 80% of your time thinking about those first two bullet points here. Who are your citizens, and not just everybody. You know, I ask cops all the time, who's your audience? Well, everybody, you know, we serve, and that is true. It's not that that's not true, but it's also the individual demographics within your city, because now you can reach people so finite, so right down to whatever group you really need to get to. And so there's no reason not to do that. If you have a group that has a special need in terms of educationally, or you know, there's just something askew with their beliefs and with what's reality or whatever, you can really get to those citizens. If you've got a group that, you know what, they don't speak English, but you really need to engage them because they're important in the prevention of crime in your area, well, you can do that now, and you don't have to have this huge marketing budget, right? And then once you figure out who they are and what their issues are, then you decide, well, what are your objectives? And of all of those objectives with all of these citizen groups, which ones of them are going to be strategically important enough for you to put it as a major part of your communication strategy? And then we talk about Facebook, and we talk about Twitter, and who are we going to buy smartphones for, or what are we going to do with regard to technology and resources and all of that. That's the plan, okay? And obviously policies are definitely important. And then laying that all out on a development schedule and a rollout schedule and an implementation schedule helps you sort of get it in line without it being too overwhelming, okay? So that's the COPS social media method, and just want to make a couple more points here before I end my portion, and that is I always sort of get up on a bit of a soapbox with regard to officer safety, and it's especially important with Facebook. In fact, I do a webinar that's absolutely free for anybody who wants it. It's about an hour long. It's all on officer safety. It's all about looking at the back end of Facebook and going through those settings. And there's always a lot to learn there. And those officers who say they have their settings set at friends only are just absolutely clueless for what's back there. And so if anybody's interested in that, just let me know. It costs absolutely nothing. But also there's just behavioral issues, things about keeping personal and professional completely separate. And we go through all of that as well. We just don't really have a lot of time in today's webinar, but really happy to do that for anybody on this call. But one of the areas within officer safety I do want to address on this webinar, and that is fake cop profiles. And so I don't mean cops who make fake profiles, because we all know about the investigative techniques that you or your colleagues use to find the pedophiles or the gangbangers or what have you. And all I want to say is that those techniques that you are using are being used in an exact flip to you and to your officers. And the unfortunate thing is, and it just astounds me the degree to which cops don't necessarily think about that, and they'll get a friend request from somebody like this guy who's not a real cop, and they'll friend him. They'll accept his friend request, and that's how they get into find information about you. And then you friend them, and then the next guy friends them because you friended them, and so forth and so on. And then they'll ask to get into a private group on Facebook, and the administrator looks at them and says, wow, you must be a real cop, and then they get in and they learn all kinds of things and gain all kinds of intelligence on you folks and the work that you do. So this guy here, it's really hard to tell some of these fake profiles. In this case, besides the goofy name that he chose, he puts up a supposed picture of himself, and then he says he's a sergeant at police. Why would you show yourself without saying what agency you're at? But again, that's not a telltale sign. If you were to click on his photos, in this case I did, and it was a lot of cartoon characters and logos, and not real photos of real people. A lot of these, most of them in fact have as their avatar photo the eagle or the flag or some religious symbol or something like that. That just looks like an officer trying to protect his identity, right? So there really is no way to know. The only thing you can do is be absolutely certain that if you're friending somebody, that that they're real. And you need to pay attention to this with your friends and colleagues too. If you see that they're friends with somebody you don't think is actually an officer, don't be afraid to speak up. I was showing this slide a few weeks ago in Ohio, and there was an officer in the audience that also pointed out to me that under employers there, the second one down, U.S. Marines, he said, no real Marine would write the word Marine without capitalizing it. That didn't occur to me, and he also pointed out that he was just a Marine for, less than a year. I guess that's pretty suspect as well. And that makes a lot of sense. But again, nothing is absolute certainty with these things. Just make sure that if you're friending somebody on Facebook, that you're especially on your personal side when you're talking about your family and your friends, you want to be absolutely certain that people are real. And in this case, the reason that I knew that he wasn't for real this was just a few months after Larry Niehausel was gunned down in the line of duty in January of 2011. So when I saw this Facebook profile, it was about March or April of 2011. And so that's what sort of caught our eye on this. And so with that, I would just like to say that, and I meant to say earlier, We have ample opportunity for questions during this webinar. You can ask them while we're going. If you click on the little raise your hand button there, Sarah Carnes with Bright Planet is on board with us today for support, and she will see it and interrupt us if she thinks that it's a good one to interrupt us for, or in the questions area. Go ahead and write your questions in there. And so with that, I'm going to switch this over to Al now if she hasn't already switched the screens. And I'm going to start monitoring questions as well. I'll be happy to take whatever questions that you folks have at the end. We should have a good 10 minutes or so at the end for you to ask questions. All right, Al, you can take it away if you'd like, sir.
Thanks, Lori. Are we up and running? Can everyone see my screen?
I don't think they're going to be able to answer you.
Alrighty. Well, for today's agenda for my presentation, I'm just going to talk about how social media has kind of changed the landscape to be able to do real-time situational awareness. And then in the second half, I'm going to get into some of the applications for investigations as it involves social media, and then I'm just going to kind of briefly touch on some of the things that Lori had talked about for developing a policy for social media. So that having been said, our company Bright Planet, we've been around for about 10 years now. We've been primarily working with the U.S. intel agencies, supporting the war on terror, collecting publicly available information from the web, more specifically the deep web, and I'll get into that a little later on in the presentation, to do these 6 things from publicly available sources. So about 1.5 years ago, we started transitioning our products and services from the intel agencies down to state, local law enforcement and fusion centers as well. So during that transition period, it was highly recommended to us by some of our advocates at the Department of Homeland Security to create a lightweight, affordable offering for state, local law enforcement that would be affordable on an operating budget. So out of that came our BlueJay Twitter crime scanner. So I just want to talk about Twitter as a source of investigation and intelligence briefly here. So there are over 5 million tweets that go through Twitter every day. The sheer volume of all of those tweets is just far too much for Twitter's own API to be able to index that. And studies have shown that you're privy to anywhere from 1% to 40% of all of the content out there on Twitter if you're using their API. And that's why I have the little whale icon down there, because if the traffic's just too heavy on Twitter, the whole the site will go down, and they'll have to bring it back up when the load of all of the users is not so overwhelming for the API to index. So that's a significant difference between all of the content that's actually out there on Twitter and what you actually have access to just by using the public-facing API. So I want to talk about fire hose access a little bit. With the API, you're going to get limited results. The fire hose access, you don't have any restrictions. You're guaranteed to get all of the tweets that meet your requirement. So a lot of people ask us, why wouldn't I just use a free tool that looks at Twitter? And we respond to that by saying, what are you actually missing with those free tools? So some of the differences is the fire hose operates in real time. You're able to make your results specific to locations or large events that you're having. And then you're guaranteed to get all of the results that meet your criteria. So as you can guess, our BlueJay Twitter crime scanner does have fire hose access. You make results specific to locations you choose, users you choose, and keywords as well. And you have the ability to archive and export up to 100,000 tweets, and it is a completely browser-based solution. So if you have any Twitter users that you'd like to follow, you can add them into a user watch here on the left. You can put in place name locations here, meaning if I was from Alexandria, Virginia, and I tweeted one of our nefarious keywords here in the middle, that would be a relevant result within our live stream. So Once you have it set up, the results will come in real time. That's one of the benefits of having the fire hose access. And then any geolocated tweets will be overlaid on the map with the exact lat long from where that originated at. We also have a basic user view as well. You can see any recent photos or videos that the individual has posted when they're most active on Twitter, and then what links are they tweeting with their friends and their followers. So here are just a couple use cases of how our customers have been using BlueJay. So as you can see up on the screen, there are a lot of different applications. It just depends on what you're looking for. So it's very important to know the slang keywords that you would be looking for whatever topics or problem sets that you face. So feel free to kick the tires on our free trial. You can sign up at brightplanet.com/BlueJay. We also have some premium add-ons for an annual BlueJay subscription. Just being able to play any geolocated tweets within a 24-hour live event monitor. We can certainly play back any Twitter data that you're interested in going back and looking at with our fire hose access. And then we also offer up an annual license of GeoTime free for a year with our partnership agreement with our partners over there at GeoTime. So for the second half of the presentation, I just kind of want to create some common language here around the deep web. I'm going to refer to the surface web as any piece of content that's indexed by your major search engines, Google, Bing, and Yahoo. So you go out to that search engine, you type a keyword in there, you get 50 million results. That's what's indexed on the surface web. And I'm going to refer to the term the deep web is everything out there on the web that is not indexed by Google, Bing, or Yahoo. The internet is just far too large for those major search engines to index every little piece of content on the web. So just kind of want to throw some statistics up here about the size and the complexity of the deep web. The last extensive study was done in 2001. At that time, it was estimated that the deep web was anywhere from 400 to 500 times larger than what was indexed by Google, Bing, and Yahoo. But back then, there were only about 3 million domains on the web. Fast forwarding to today, there's an estimated 555 million domains on the web. So there's just no telling how much larger the deep web is today compared to the last study that was done in 2001. So if I'm a major search engine, Google, Bing, or Yahoo, if I go to index WebMD as a website, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a very basic link crawling technique where I'm going to click on all the links on this page, go to the next page, click on all those links, and so on and so forth until I can't go any further. And that's what gets indexed by Google, Bing, and Yahoo on the surface web. But what it's missing is all of that data behind that search box because it's not issuing any queries to that dynamic database. So WebMD has its own database of documents that you need to put in a keyword to search against on. So this content is not indexed by Google, Bing, and Yahoo, and we can certainly automate the process of harvesting that content by building a little script around that individual search box with our patented technologies. So I want to focus on the first two products and services here. Number one up there in the green, that's typically the route the intel agencies have taken, just a license of the harvesting software. They put it behind their firewall and do with it what they want. Now number two is more of a software as a service model where your subject matter experts say, hey, we're interested in collecting this kind of content from these kind of sources, and our in-house investigators will go collect that in a in an automatic way and store it within our deep web silos where the user can view the content. So this is just a brief overview of the process that we go through when we stand up these deep web silos. So our Deep Harvester workbench, it can collect content from any publicly available source on the web in any language. So it'll go out to all those websites looking for those specific keywords, and it'll refresh that content on a custom schedule, whether it be every 10 minutes, every 10 days, whatever the end user wants. And then before all of that unstructured data gets into our deep web silo, we'll perform an enrichment process to be able to structure the content, to tag entities of interest within there, so that downstream we can upload that data into any third-party analytical solutions that you may be interested in using, which brings me to the next slide, which is our Open Planet platform, where our harvester sits on the left that is responsible for collecting all of that content on the web. But then we look to plug and play with third-party analytical solutions, whether you use an I2, Analyst Notebook, a Palantir, or a Centrifuge to be able to do visualization. We can certainly take any of that data that we've harvested and plug it in to those third-party analytical solutions. So at the end of the day, when you're looking at a traditional time investment to be able to do open source intelligence, if you're manually doing it one click at a time, you're likely spending a bulk of your time in the collection and filtering phase. Very labor intensive, a lot of clicks, which leaves you very little time out the back end to be able to analyze that data and produce intelligence reports. But when you add some automation into your process, that can take all of that collecting and all of that filtering kind of off of your back, so to speak. Then you're on the back end, you're going to be able to focus majority of your time in the analysis and production of those intel reports rather than the collection and filtering phase. So I'd like to kind of highlight some of the work that we've been doing with the Detroit Crime Commission. We've been working with them for about the last 10 months, and here were some of the crime statistics that they had given to us when they had first approached us. So we have put together a silo of information from social media for the Crime Commission to use to try to reduce that second bullet point there, the amount of crimes that get reported within a 1-mile radius of the public schools there in Detroit. So this is a screenshot of the user interface, and it collects intelligence across these 6 things, focusing primarily on reducing the violence in and around the public schools there in Detroit. So now the Crime Commission is a 501c3, they are .org. So what they do with the intelligence that they collect from social media specific to the Detroit-based area, what they do with all the information they get off of this is they deliver actionable intelligence reports to state local law enforcement. So it's kind of a 2-prong approach. We gather the data as a service with our automated tools, and then the intel that they gather from there, they hand over to state local law enforcement to say, hey, you might want to look into this. So a few months ago, we exported some of the geolocated data from the silo, looking at some of the violent actors in the Detroit-based area, and found this one particularly interesting because the cluster on the left likely identifies a home location for this known criminal. But then we can kind of see a few different workplaces that they travel out to consistently during the day. So this was just one of the anecdotal quotes that we had gotten from the Crime Commission in regards to our silo services as a technology platform. So, and for the third part of the presentation here, just kind of wanted to turn it over to some policy resources for law enforcement. There's a document released back in March by the Criminal Coordinating Intelligence Council, the CICC, which just kind of gives a kind of a broad overview of, developing a policy to be able to collect intelligence from social media and to also use it for investigative activities as well. So within the document, they they highlight 7 key elements of putting together a social media policy. Lori touched on a lot of them earlier in the presentation. One thing I like about the document is they actually have actual policies from police departments in the back. I believe they have the Georgia Bureau of Investigations social media policy, which is provides as a great resource to state local law enforcement. So you can find that document here at it.ojp.gov. And we've also got some more CICC resources, but then we highly encourage you to check Lori Stevens out for social media consultation at lawscommunications.com. So with that having been said, I think we can turn it over to questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Al. I'll go ahead with one question that we have in there right now. I believe it's for you, Al. And I think it was after you began your part with Deep Web, but maybe answer it for both of your tools, and that is there a law enforcement discount? So why don't you address that?
Well, we offer the free trial of BlueJay just to see if it'd be a good fit for your department. But the pricing is universal across the board, so there are no discounts.
Okay, and if there are other questions, go ahead and put them in the question box, or show your do the little raise your hand thing in the control panel, and we'll try to call on you. Sarah, did you pick up on any others?
Yeah, we're getting some come in now too. In the DCC example, how is the geolocation being tracked? So that's for Al.
It's primarily off of Twitter data is how that geolocation information was tracked, and then what we're doing there is we're using the GeoTime platform. They're a third-party analytical partner of Bright Planet to be able to visualize that data through space and time.
And then Lori, another one is you had mentioned kind of obviously starting before the plan, but what would your recommendation be for folks just getting, just starting out, and who should be involved in getting started on putting together a strategy?
Oh, excellent question. I think that you need to have, obviously the main players are going to be responsible for taking part in it. You need members of command who, whatever highest level you need that have the authority to, make decisions and so forth. Should have somebody from your legal department definitely involved. To the extent that you're covering cyber vetting, and I hope you are, you want to have your HR department involved. So for example, when I work with an agency, particularly a large agency, those are the kinds of people that we have involved in the actual development of the plan. But then, particularly in the size of Dallas, I'm talking to all the stakeholders they'll allow me to talk to, everybody from homicide investigators to, the community liaison people, just to get any kind of input I can in order to really properly address that discovery that I think needs to be done.
Excellent. Al or Lori, probably both maybe. Any good examples of higher education institutions utilizing social media well to engage students, community, faculty, staff, responders?
Ooh, really good question. I do know this is maybe it's better for Al, but when I first started learning about social media monitoring, higher ed was one of the areas that was really into it early, and really understood the power and the usefulness of the platforms such as Bright Planet's platforms, because a lot of the D1 schools were looking at their own athletes, and they really wanted to make sure that they weren't saying something inappropriate, but also they wanted to see what people were saying about them. So that, that's kind of a cool thing. As far as actually using it on the community outreach side, I don't really know of one. I think Yale's doing a decent job. I'm in contact a little bit with their chief, Ron Higgins, out there, and I know he does an outstanding job. But the extent to which they have a comprehensive, integrated strategy across the campus, I don't really know. I do know that Boston College here in the Massachusetts area is definitely moving in that direction, but not absolutely certain of some others.
Excellent. And another one for you, Lori. How are you finding courts are reacting, accepting documentation of social media as admissible evidence?
That's another area where I'm not the expert in, but I can tell you that the courts themselves don't really understand a lot of what is being presented to them. So I think all the more reason to make sure that whatever evidence is being gathered is done in, as what's the right word, intelligent a way as possible, obviously. But I think that we really have to make sure that the way it is presented to the courts is going to be, I'm struggling for the right word, but done in such a way that we don't have some really bad case law coming out of this. And that's a big concern, especially among members of the monitoring community with regard to how these tools are even being used and so forth. So I mean, while it's a good question, I think that we're all learning, and I don't really have a good answer for, or good examples anyway, of ones where it was accepted or not accepted to really share with you today. Sorry.
All right. And then Al, for you, in BlueJay, what is the difference in data gathered by geofences and locations in the location list?
In the locations list, it's looking to match a profile description of that location. So if you have that in your bio, and then the geofences are looking for geolocated tweets that match the keywords as well.
Hey, Sarah, I saw one that's for Al that said, could I ask you to return to the slide with the location information and the likely home location and review that again? Does that make sense to you, Al?
Yeah, yep,
Okay,
certainly.
return to the slide with the location information and the likely home location and review that again.
Must be the geotime one.
And after you do that, I'll take Rick's question on ROI.
All right, Lori. Well, we could leave that one up if you want to take the question.
Okay. So the question is, can you speak more specifically to the ROI for police departments and other organizations? Not sure that the audience understands the ROI for this capacity. So Rick, if you want to clarify if you mean this for Al or for myself, but I think otherwise we'll both try to answer it. In terms of return on investment for kind of my side of the house, the way I address that is to develop solid metrics for determining where you came from and where you go with some of this stuff. So for example, in the larger agencies especially, but I even have a client right now that's itty bitty, and we're starting with a survey to kind of determine a baseline for what people know about how their department is communicating with them, how they want to be communicated with, and so forth, so that then when we go back and repeat the survey 6 months or a year later, we can see if our efforts have paid off. And we also ask questions about their confidence in the PD and their their loyalty to the PD and their trust in the PD, and we also see then if that's been positively or negatively affected later. But I'm going to go ahead and also turn that over to Al to talk about ROI. What have you got to say, Al, for return on investment with your monitoring solutions?
Well, I mean the automation is probably the biggest part for ROI. It'll essentially do an analyst's job, kind of even when they're sleeping, so to speak. So there's great value that comes from defining your own data sets. Definitely want to scope out what's in bounds and what's out of bounds in your social media policy. But the biggest ROI comes from taking a lot of the clicks out of your day and automating the process of that analyst, so that they can spend more time on the back end focusing on analyzing that data and then producing intelligence reports rather than kind of aimlessly wandering around the internet.
Right. Hey, Al, that particular person is also asking about whether or not there's a location on the web for us to see more use cases in the application of your technology. So I just wanted to set that up for you because I also want to add to your answer there. I don't know if it was you guys or another, platform out there that told me a story once about there was some protesters or some ne'er-do-well is going to do something, and it was just before the Christmas holidays last year when then they started picking up chatter from this group saying that they weren't going to do whatever it was they were going to do after all over the Christmas holiday because they disliked police officers so much that they didn't want them to earn the double time or the triple time or whatever extra pay that they earned by having to work on Christmas Day. And so they used that chatter and they went ahead and backed off from the extra coverage that they were going to put on. And it was a little bit of a calculated risk, but it was a good one. The potential criminal activity didn't happen after all, and so it was well into the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in overtime pay that they ended up saving just in one case there because they were really looking at and evaluating the conversation that was happening online. Go ahead, Al, if you'd like to talk about the other question there about location for the application of your technology.
Yeah, certainly. I'd be more than happy to, if you guys just want to fill out this form, if you guys would like to follow up with either myself or Lori, we can get into some of the more specific use cases if you're
Okay.
interested.
The person also asking it also says, and I'm quoting him now, he says, "You know me, Al. I am trying to inquire about some organizations around here in North Carolina that are involved in human trafficking." Do you have anything to add to that, related to that?
Yeah, good to hear from you, Rick. I hope all's been well. We've been very interested in going after um, some human trafficking issues. We just haven't really been able to find a good group to sponsor the efforts with us. So I can download with you offline here, Rick, on some of the work that we've done with Backpage and some other sites in regards to human trafficking or sex trafficking.
You're right, that was Rick Miskey. And then also there's a question here, I think I'll take it unless you've got something to add to it, Al, and that is, where's the most reliable info on demographics for social media use, and does that source provide annual updates? This would be particularly helpful in choosing certain tools. Really great question, Jessica, and that's a good thing to look at. I would direct you first to the Pew Internet Research. They do really good demographics broken down by, people want to use mobile, do they want to do it this way, that way? They break it down by age group, and they repeat that survey every single year. And you can see how, especially I like to look at the 54 to 60-year-olds, really how that grows every year because, as a lot of us think it's all about the young people. It's really not. The older demographics are the fastest growing age group in terms of implementing on social media. And I would also direct you might have to do a couple searches on it. I think it used to be called Face Bakers or something like that because it was all about Facebook. And now I think it's Social Bakers, something to that effect. If you go to socialbakers.com and that doesn't look like it, ping me an email and I'll find it for you. But they've got some good demographics in there too. And as I recall, some of it is even broken down by different parts of the world. But definitely Pew is the one to rely on in that case. Okay, and here's another one from James. Question for Lori. What police department on the East Coast utilizes a policy to determine if a social media undercover investigation is warranted, authorized, and can we get a copy of said policy? I think there are several. I think that the Florida Ooh, I'm gonna mess this up. It's their State Department there, and I always forget what it's called. They've got a decent policy. The one that Al referred to earlier was the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and that's in that document that he referred to. You might have been referring to the comment I made about the East Coast department that determines if undercover investigations is warranted, and that was NYPD. I don't usually like to badmouth them and then say who I'm badmouthing, so I didn't say NYPD. NYPD, don't get me wrong, they're doing great work. It's not that. It's just that if you look at their policy, it's very good in terms of if you're going to go undercover, but if you're not going undercover, it just doesn't. And I'm just suggesting that you do a better job at covering that side of investigations. And can you get a copy? Yeah, sure, I've got it. Send me an email. And I'll send it out to you if you'd like it. Or if, I mean, it's pretty easy to find if you just Google, NYPD social media policy, investigations policy rather.
And Lori, Al, here's another one for you. Are geolocated tweets completely dependent on whether the user settings and the user's Twitter account are GPS enabled?
Yes. Yep, they are completely dependent upon that individual having their GPS coordinates activated on their mobile device.
Rich Pugh, yes, that's the spelling. PEW, Internet Research. I think it's called Internet and American Life or something like that. But you go to pew.org and you will find it. ICP Center for Social Media has a sample social media policy. I think the IACP's communications sample, they developed it a few years back, is a good one for a checklist. I don't consider it necessarily a policy, but it would be a good one to use in conjunction with many others in terms of starting to develop your policy. I think that especially these days, since it was developed, there's been a lot of things that have come to light that need to be included in a social media policy that aren't in there.
Well, that's all
I don't see others.
Yeah, that's all I see, Lori.
Alrighty. Well, I'm going to take one more quick peek at if there's any. The greatest limitations of the BlueJay. Okay, Al, this is for you. Greatest limitations of BlueJay and deep web harvesting software at this point in time.
What's the question? What's the greatest limitation?
What's the greatest? What are your limitations right now with regard to kind of where you're at with your technology?
Well, I mean, our developers are writing code every day to stay on top of all of the complexities that are out on the internet. So I mean, it's kind of a vague question. I don't know.
Okay. I'll have to tweet activity, please dispatch it. Okay, I'm not sure. I think that's sort of a message saying they're gonna email me. Social bakers, yes. So the other one that I mentioned was Pew, PEW, Internet Research. PEW, it's a nonprofit internet research. Well, they do more than internet research group, but the question had been about gathering information and demographic information about use of social media. So I definitely would, I rely on Pew more than any others. So that's the one I would recommend. Oh, yes. Thank you, Dave. Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE, they would have a good investigations policy. And I would definitely recommend looking them up. I just could not come up with that name.
And then Al, there's a BlueJay pricing question. So what is the pricing on BlueJay and then Deep Web Solutions as well?
The pricing for BlueJay, that's sold as a single user subscription at $150 a month. And then the deep web silos, it's kind of a custom a la carte pricing, depends on size and scope. So yeah.
Well, Sarah, Al, I think that's a wrap. It looks like we've answered the questions that were there. If anybody has any others, our email addresses are pretty easy to find. There it is. Thank you, Al. So there's both of our email addresses if you have questions. Or, I mean, there are about 800 different ways to reach both of us with social media these days. So let us know if there's absolutely anything that we can do for you. And with that, I'm ready to say goodbye. How about you, Al?
Yep. Thanks for joining
Okay.
us today, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. We have recorded this, and so both Bright Planet and I on Laws Communications, it'll actually be on the YouTube/LawsCom YouTube channel, and that will be there. And then I'm sure Bright Planet will be reposting it on their site as well. Thanks, all.
Yep. Thank you.